Hello, everyone. It's high noon on Monday, January 26th, officially a snow day slash ice day. So here in North Carolina, we didn't get as much snow as they said we were going to get because obviously weathermen can say anything they want to say. But we did get enough sleet and ice that the roads outside are a mix of okay and a mess. And because I live on acreage way out on a non state maintained road, our roads are a mess. And so I'm at home. And so since I'm at home, I thought it would be a good chance to bring y'all some information on a couple of things that I'm getting a lot of questions about. Now, if you've never met me before, I'm a 26-year realtor here in North Carolina. My family goes back in North Carolina to the 1700s, back before my current county, Cabarrus County, even existed, and before the founding of this great country. I'm also an auctioneer, and I'm enjoying that way more than I expected. And I'm an author of four, count them, four best-selling books, and also a cookbook, which wasn't a bestseller, but hey, it was enjoyable at the time. And I've got a nonprofit called Patriot Relief, which is continuing to assist those in Western North Carolina that were impacted by Hurricane Helene in September of 2024. And I'm a motivational and keynote speaker who loves getting people re-engaged and more passionate about what really matters to them. All of that being said, on a snow and ice day, the best thing ever is to be able to ask questions. So if you happen to be logged into this, hit the chat block over here and ask away, because I'm going to start with a couple of the things that I'm getting questions about right now. The first one is, of course, auctions, because hey, Leigh Brown, you've been a successful realtor for 26 years. You've done so many things in that space. Why go into auction? Well, I went and got my auction license because it's required in North Carolina if you want to sell things by auction, even though a lot of people out there call things auctions and don't have a license, but I digress. I wanted to be able to offer an extra service to the people who want to sell their house, but have stuff inside they want to sell as well. And not all of us are interested in Facebook Marketplace or strangers coming up to the door or the pain of a yard sale, because I'm just going to tell y'all, yard sales might be the most painful thing ever, because you've got an item out there that you're only asking $1 for, and somebody wants to argue over a quarter, and then they come driving slowly by at the end of your yard sale trying to snipe it from the Kidney Foundation. Terrible manners. But all that being said, I know that inside a home are so many items, and what you don't have, frankly, is time. So what we've been doing is helping people alleviate the stress of getting the house emptied out. I have one right now that's open, and it'll close tomorrow at 7 p.m. So if you want to see how it works, you can go to LeighBrownAuctions.com, and you can see information about the general auction process, but there's a big button on there for an open auction, which I'm just realizing I need to edit the button because we extended it with yesterday being a snow and ice day, but it closes tomorrow. So here's how the auction works. If, for example, you're looking for a workbench for your garage, well, there's a workbench for sale at this house. Now, what it's going to go for, we don't know until tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. And you can bid now, you can bid tomorrow. And when you place your bid, you're going to have to register on the site. That's to make sure you're not a scammer and to make sure that you are going to go through with the process, because auctions, once you bid, if you win, it's yours. And if you don't fulfill your end of the bargain by paying for it and picking it up, you can get banned from future auctions, because it's a whole different world than you just throwing things out there into the planet. So you might bid on this workbench, and today the bid is low. Tomorrow it's going to ratchet up. The last 24 hours of an auction are always when things get more expensive, because the experienced bidders often wait until the last 24 hours. Now, what you're going to get it for, that particular workbench, is an absolute auction. That means whatever the high bid is wins. There's no bottom dollar. There's no safety net for the seller. It's just going to sell for what it sells for. Then you win the bid, you'll pay right away, and then you pick it up on pickup day. These are not negotiable dates. You don't get to say, well, that day's not convenient. If you bid, you got to pick it up on pickup day. And if you don't pick it up on pickup day, it's abandoned. So the auction world does have some expectations. And so if you've never bid in them before, I want you to be aware of how that works. Oh, look, there comes a comment. Okay. So that's just a reminder to y'all to ask some questions. Thank you, Lisa. So what I want you to also know is that when you bid in these auctions, you're going to get to the end at 7 o'clock. Now, this is where some confusion comes in. The end of the auction is staggered to give people a chance to get their last bid in. So 2 items will close every minute. So starting at 7 o'clock, it's going to start closing. That means that the last items 111, 112, won't close right away. So if you can do the math right quick, it's going to be closer to 8 o'clock before those start closing out. Now, we don't know the exact time because if you bid in the last minute of that auction, it's going to extend the time frame, which is called a soft close. It gives the other bidders a chance to jump in as opposed to what happens on, say, eBay. So just get smart about auctions. We do have a link where you can download a guide so that you know what you're doing. And if you're thinking about selling a house, just so you know, there are a lot of amazing auction estate companies out there. I've worked with them, I've bought from them, they're fantastic. But we're offering a concierge service. And so we would be glad to talk to you about selling your house and the items inside. So that's a little bit about auctions. And by the way, the deals can be amazing because if you're picking something that nobody knows what it is, they didn't figure it out, then you can jump in. But you might also overpay because your emotions going to kick up. And we all have this human nature that wants to win. So if you're that person, just have somebody wise sitting beside you to help you slow your roll. Now, I'll go ahead and point one more thing out in auction world. You'll have a written description of an item and there's photos. Always go by the photos first because the description may have missed something that got added to the lot and something might be typed incorrectly. What's in the photos is what you're going to get. So if you were bidding on a lot, so a collection of items, because you wanted one mirror, for example, but it comes with 5 other mirrors, when you go to pick up, you're not just taking what you want, you have to take the whole lot. These are some of the very simple and finite rules in auction world. So just know what you're getting into. It's a lot of fun. It's frankly one of my favorite ways to buy things. And y'all, that's how I got my hex-clad dinnerware, my cookingware, because of course Gordon Ramsay talks about hex-clad, so that's what I want. And I got it at an auction for way less than retail. And all I had to do was wash it. So you can always find a deal like that. So that's the little scoop on auctions. And I'd love for y'all to go check out the one we have right now in Harrisburg, North Carolina. You again can go to LeighBrownAuctions.com. And if you want to get there the short way, it's bid.LeighBrownAuctions.com. Okay, the next thing I want to talk with y'all about is an opportunity in our real estate market that hasn't been here for some several years. This is one of the burdens and opportunities of me being a long in the tooth realtor. I have seen ups, downs, and sideways in the market. And just like everything else, when you go through cycles, certain things re-emerge. I could point out that as a child of the 80s, it was so much fun to see leg warmers come back. And I was really glad when they went on away again, but I don't understand high-waisted jeans. I don't get that part of the cycle. Maybe you young people can explain it. I didn't like them then, don't like them now. But when you start realizing that there's cycles that go on, a big thing that is reoccurring in the marketplace are contingent offers. So let's talk briefly about contingent offers, because what I have found is that some agents don't understand how to present them to win. A lot of sellers don't understand that it could be okay. And a lot of buyers don't understand why it is or is not hurting them. So I'll talk to you from all those perspectives. Now, again, in my 26 years, I have seen great markets. So that would be the COVID market where everything sold immediately and it was way too fast and way too hot. And then I worked real estate during the Great Recession when a lot of us were just at a loss as to what was going to happen next. At that time, we saw a lot of contingent offers because a seller said, don't care what the buyer has to offer, please just bring us something. It was a way different environment. And then as you move into a hot market like the COVID market, every seller wanted the cleanest offer possible because why would they take anything less when you had so many people out there with no contingencies on their offers? So here's a couple of things to know about contingencies. First of all, the term contingency can be used to describe anything that you have to cross as a hurdle to buy a house. This could also apply to normal contracts. I'm talking real estate here. So the contingency might be, we're going to have financing. That's a contingency. It could be that we're going to have an appraisal with that financing. It could be related to the home inspection. The biggest, stickiest one would be the ability for the buyer to sell their home first in order to buy the follow-up home. All of those things could fall under, in North Carolina, we have the structure of due diligence. That's an investigation period. And in that investigation period, you're supposed to knock out all things related to the sale of your house. Okay. And if you don't get it knocked out, you don't buy the house, well, you're still going to leave some deposit behind. Other states, of course, operate differently. What I want to focus on here is, should you buy a house if you're buying before you sell your house? And if you're selling your house, should you accept the buyer who has something to sell first? I have seen several of these offers on our listings here recently, and I want to tell you some of the biggest mistakes I've seen. Number one, we had an offer to come in from a local professional real estate agent with an offer to purchase on my listing. And in the offer, it said that this purchase was contingent upon the sale of their other house. My next question to that agent is, what's the address of that house? Is it on the market? Who's marketing it? How's it priced? Where's the CMA, or the comparative market analysis? The agent gave me no answers to anything. Okay, now I then can say to myself, I don't think this agent has a serious buyer, because a serious buyer prepares all the information so they can win the house. This was not a serious buyer. If you won't tell me that your house is on the market, how it's priced, what it looks like on the inside, why would my people take their house off the market to give you a chance? Doesn't make any sense. Which goes to the seller side of it. I talked to my sellers and I said, y'all can do what you want to do. It's your house. North Carolina requires me to present all offers, but this is not going anywhere because the agent won't even answer any questions. A good agent's prepared to answer questions for the other side. So we did not consider it further. And then I followed up with this agent a couple days later and said, hey, friend, hey, did you forget to respond to my email with answers to these questions? And she said, oh, I've been out of town. I said, great. When can I have the information? To this day, she has never followed up on that offer that was sent, never sent me information about the house they purportedly wanted to sell. And so that has just kind of vanished into the ever world like a puff of dandelion grass. It's just gone. Y'all, that's not going to help you win. But if you're a serious buyer who says, but I for real want this house, but I cannot have two mortgages, I have to sell my house first. I get that. During the COVID times, you knew that if you told somebody you had a house to sell, it was probably going to sell. But now that we are in more of a normal market, what you should know is that a seller doesn't have as many buyers either. So they might be willing to listen to your need to sell your house first. It all depends, right? All depends on the situation. So for the buyer who intends to sell their house, when I get the offer from that agent, which is one I have right now, highly professional realtor I've known for years. So I already know coming into this offer presentation that she's skilled and knows what she's doing. Because y'all, your reputation matters, and the reputation of your realtor matters in you winning or losing an offer. And you might say that's wrong, but I'm going to tell you that I know what experience means. It doesn't mean an inexperienced agent can't be a winner, but they will have been guided by a mentor or a broker who's pouring into them as well. So this experienced agent brings me this offer, and she says right up front, hey, here's our offer. Yes, it's contingent. Will your sellers consider that? And I said to her, what? I said, it depends. So I asked her about the house. She gave me the address. She gave me their listing price, gave me information about the condition upgrades, gave me the CMA, gave me everything that I needed to go to my sellers and say, this buyer is presenting this for price and this for terms and this, and they have a house to sell, and here's the scoop on that house. So now my recommendation to them is it may be worth taking a chance on, because I have enough information to give good counsel. I hope y'all are paying attention to this, because I think the contingent offers from buyers will continue to increase as long as our markets are in some kind of a status form. So she brought the offer, my sellers accepted it, and then 5 days after contract on the one they want to buy, their originating house went under contract. So it looks like we will possibly have a very good domino effect. It matters so much, and I can't stress this enough. In fact, I'll turn this into a YouTube short later. It matters tremendously who you pick as a realtor. If they are going to be conscientious about the preparation of your offer so that you can win, and if they're going to be conscientious about the presentation so that the seller gets the best possible outcome. There is no perfect outcome. There is nothing that's not going to be stressful and painful. Nobody knows where prices land because the markets are so fluid. However, a good professional presentation can make all the difference as to whether you get a yes or a no. So, yes, you can sell contingent. Yes, a seller can take a contingent offer. And yes, a good realtor will package that up all the way through. I will point this out. If you are thinking of selling your house before you buy, then just know that your sale could happen before your purchase happens, which is what people have done for a long time. They found somewhere to live in the interim, so they didn't take the risk of a contingent offer because a non contingent offer is more attractive. Just going to lay that out there. Now, I do want to point out when I speak about the professional attitude of realtors, there are moments that can feel very tense in real estate. I had a situation with another agent this past week where he represented the buyer, brought forth their offer. We made a counter, they made a counter, we made a counter, went back and forth. And then the buyer squeaked and said, "This is our top dollar." And the seller squeaked and said, "Well, this is our bottom dollar." They were not the same number. And it just didn't work out. So when I called the agent to tell him that the sellers had decided not to move forward in this negotiation, they were done, I said to him what I say to pretty much every agent: I hope to work with you again in the future because we're messengers, y'all. And sometimes it's true in real estate that when you're representing a seller or when you're representing a buyer, what you're bringing forth is not your personal opinion. In fact, for a good agent, it's usually not your personal opinion because you are representing what someone else has told you and you're trying to help people come to a common ground. But common ground isn't always going to be reached. So when I said to him, "I hope to work with you again in the future," he said to me, "I don't want that to happen. Don't see that happening. Couldn't stand dealing with you," and got a little bit brusque with me, which surprised me, to be honest. And so I told him I didn't appreciate that response because as a messenger, I was delivering the message that I had been asked to deliver. When you get emotional about a transaction, that makes it hard for you to gather information so you can convey it back to buyers and sellers. So that's all I'll say about that. I know it's hard. Of course, I looked this agent up. I'm a lot older than this one is. I've been in a lot longer, and that shouldn't have had anything to do with it. But it allowed me to think to myself, he'll probably cool off in a day or two and realize that the problem isn't always with the buyer or the seller or the other agent. Sometimes it's just a number isn't going to work for everybody. I also want to point out something really, it hit me pretty hard. As we were discussing some of the terms of that buyer's offer as opposed to the seller's opinion of those terms, a comment was made, "It's only a couple $1,000s." I just want to say that as a professional real estate agent, as somebody who's been a broker for 26 years, a couple $1,000s is a lot of real money. And as the agent, it is not my job to ever say to a buyer or seller, "It's just a couple $1,000s," because that is not my money. And anytime I hear an agent get very dismissive about somebody else's dollars, it does raise my hackles a bit because when we are a true fiduciary for somebody and we're looking out for their best interest, we would never diminish what their position is. I can give my best counsel, but I'm not going to diminish in that way. And I did not convey that comment to my sellers because that would have set them even more on fire than they were already on fire for other reasons. But it did occur to me that we have a long way to go in professional real estate if that's the attitude of somebody who's out there representing buyers and sellers. And I doubt this agent will ever see this, but if he does, I hope he will reconsider the comments that just, it's not helpful. And it's also the absolute wrong thing for a fiduciary to do. Okay. I've also gotten a question here of late about what is going on in local real estate politics. Well, when I talk about local real estate politics, it's not about the trade association. Our trade association's job in real estate is to gather information about the policies that can harm or help our local communities. It is to figure out if there's candidates that we are or are not going to support. On the local level, I think the realtor associations could do a far better job of selecting good candidates to back because The local level is the most overlooked, I think, when it comes to selecting thoughtful people who are willing to engage with ideas across the spectrum. Many of us are aware of what happens at the state level. And of course, we get fairly consumed by what happens in Washington, D.C., overlooking what happens at the local level. In the county where I live, which is Cabarrus County, North Carolina, I was watching the county commission meeting last week on YouTube because it was late, didn't make it over to the government center in time to go to the meeting. So I watched online because I feel it's important to pay attention to the elected leaders that are making those decisions. And there was a spirited conversation about the Economic Development Committee and about the corporation that runs our economic development and what the general attitude is going to be towards that. Now, you should know that in our county, we currently have a 3-2 split on the county commission. That means 3 are going to vote together and 2 are not going to vote with those 3 unless there's something that feels fairly obvious. There's an occasional 4-1, sometimes a 5-0. But if there's anything contentious, the 3-2 is the line. It just is what it is right now. As much as I might disagree that there should be any kind of coalitions like that inside a locally elected body that has to serve a whole county. But anyway, one of our elected officials said that we are, and I'm not making this up, we are over-businessed. As a small business owner myself, that bothers me tremendously. Not just because it's a made-up word and is a travesty for how the English language works, but because any county that is fortunate enough to struggle with growth issues, which my county is, has to make a decision at some point about how do you maintain and support the people who live there. When you tell businesses they are not welcome, you're harming the residents of a county. Full stop. And why do I say that? Well, when there are businesses in any county, first of all, there will be taxes with their headquarters. That's a no-brainer. And there will be tax credits that will offset some portion of it over time. But over time, undeveloped land does not generate the kind of tax dollars that developed land does. All right. Does not mean I would say yes to everything, but it means you have to take a nuanced approach. And the nuanced approach understands that there are tax benefits associated with having businesses there. But it doesn't stop there. When you have an employer in your area, people work there. When people can work there, they reduce their commute times, which means they can stay more engaged in the community. And it means that they can then spend their dollars at local restaurants, eating breakfast, lunch, supper. They can go out and support anything local because their dollars aren't wrapped up in gas money and especially their time being tangled up in commutes, because nobody in Cabarrus County really wants to go work in Charlotte, but Charlotte's where the jobs are. And Charlotte's got its own issues, but people keep bleeding over into our county. So I want you to think about something else when it comes to these jobs. If you are an elected official in my county who moved here after 2003, I want you to understand what happened to Cabarrus County when we lost our largest employer. Fieldcrest Cannon, which used to be Cannon Mills. That's your Cannon towels, y'all. Those really good ones that lasted forever because they were made right here in Cabarrus County. When they went under in 2003, over 3,000 people lost their jobs. It was the largest mass layoff in North Carolina history. What happened then was that there were a lot of promises made by elected officials, promises of community college for this one and a job fair over here. But you had generational workers who had found pride in working those manufacturing jobs. They were working in the same mills where their parents and grandparents had worked, proudly putting out American-made products, proudly putting out items that we could buy locally. I still have some Cannon towels, and it's 23 years since they closed. Those towels are much older than me. Well, maybe not older than me, but I digress. But they're still here. And so when you tell a current large employer that they're not welcome, are you encouraging the same kind of devastation that we saw when Cannon Mills got shuttered in 2003? Because what happened was the great sucking sound of jobs, of property taxes, of sales taxes, of dignity, of an entire community. And it took a long time for Kannapolis to come back, y'all. Now, Kannapolis has come roaring back due to some private equity partners that have decided to invest in the downtown area, who invested in our minor league team and in local businesses and in creating something that's beautiful and pedestrian friendly. But it took over 20 years for that to happen. So all I would ask is that as you're looking at your own local elections right now, or whenever you're looking at local elections, when you're talking about job creation and housing and growth, a good position for me is smart growth. That means we'll say yes sometimes, we'll say no sometimes. We're going to balance out the needs of those that are currently here with the next generation that's coming up, with what's happened historically. We're going to consider all of those things. But right now, my concern is that we are electing people who don't take into consideration any of that. They have an opinion, they slam their fist down and say, we are over business. We don't want any of that here. And I have a small business. Now, the same individual who says that we are over business is the one that told me I make too much money. And I did ask this person if he's ever seen my tax returns, because he hasn't. He doesn't know what I bring home. He just assumes. Well, I do invest in my community, and I do take a lot of my dollars to give back. And not everybody needs to know what I do with my dollars, because that would be a pretty terrible way to give back. But when you start telling business owners they make too much money, then you're falling into that trap that Ayn Rand talked about in Atlas Shrugged, with the fair share, where everything had to be equal all the time. I don't think everything has to be equal. I do think that there is a merit in people who work hard, find their place, and go do really great things, because they can then expand on that. And I do think that it's great to encourage people who rent to become homeowners if that's what they want, and to make sure that we have a broad array of options, and to make sure that if somebody is in a job that they don't like, that there's other opportunities that they could study and grow into, or apprentice and work their way into, and that we have just a broad range of everything. And you're not going to get a broad range if you're shutting things down. Now, the last thing I want to add about that is I'm not the only person in a county that's struggling with growth issues. It's happening all over North Carolina, because we've attracted in way too many people from other states. So my message to the people who are not from North Carolina is, please stop trying to change North Carolina. Your presence here already changes us, and not all of you are bad. I married a Yankee. I feel like I did my part for reconciliation. If you don't know what that means, then you better get back to your history books too. But if you move here and you start hurting this state, then frankly, you're an enemy of mine. I don't want to see happen here what's happening in so many other areas, with fraudsters that come in, people that come in that want to take instead of give. I'm a fan of people who produce. And so when I see a company come in that wants to help people improve themselves and grow and get jobs and do good, cool things, probably in favor of that. They're producers. I'm not in favor of the people that want to come in and grift. And my state is having a really hard time right now, because North Carolina is very special. North Carolina was a colony, and I love this country. My ancestors fought to make this a country, fought that this would become not just a colony, but a state. And I'm kind of in fighting mode right now too, not just for my county, but for my state and for this country, because I see what it's done for my family, who started off as a bunch of poor dirt farmers. And if you don't know what a dirt farmer is, that's somebody who is growing enough that they can survive on it, but they're not really expanding. These are not big, giant corporate, big food, big farm kind of things. It's people who work really hard and take care of their families. And so when I look at the growth that's happening, I look at all the counties around us. And one of our local counties, Stanley County, beautiful, wonderful place, passed an ordinance 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, stating that you had to have a minimum of 3 acres to build a house. The belief behind this is that it would keep Stanley County more rural in nature, more agriculture in nature. And I feel that. I feel that the desire for something to stay ag. I grew up on a farm. I get it. We need farmers so badly. We do not need big food. That's a whole different video. But when you start talking about restricting the acreage on which a house can be built, you're getting on top of people's property rights. And in the Fifth Amendment, it says private property shall not be taken. The founding fathers were so serious about people's ability to buy and own land that they got it enshrined into the Bill of Rights. So if you're thinking, well, Leigh, but to support land and to support ag and the rural nature, you do have to have minimum acreage amounts. Well, let me just posit this to you. What if your grandma lives on 5 acres and she wants to give an acre to this grandson and an acre to this granddaughter so they can put their own house out there? She can have them nearby, but she's not able to take care of 5 acres anymore. Well, under the new rules, you're going to have to get a variance because they're wanting to build on less than 3 acres. Now, of course, there's different zones in the county. They'll give you every excuse in the book for how I'm making this worse than it is. But the reality is, when you tell grandma what she can and can't do with her 5 acres, now you're crossing the line. The beauty of our country has always been that people had the freedom to, on their house, they could add a shop, they could do something beautiful. I mean, North Carolina used to have only as beauty parlors the lady who would have her husband build her a beauty parlor on their property, where he would also have his auto shop on the other side, because you didn't have restrictions from these big city people who moved in and took over the regulatory burdens and took over the zoning and said, no, you can't do that on your own land. So I think we're going to have to do some very hard thinking about how we fix this, because back to my Stanley County example, what I was told by a very lovely county commissioner that I think is a very smart fella, he'd said, we don't want Charlotte moving over here. And I said, friend, you're making it so that it's so expensive, only Charlotte can buy over here. So if your goal was to keep the big city people from taking over your county, you just actually put something in place that has unintended consequences, because the bigger the acreage, the more expensive the house is going to be. And y'all, that's just the nature of how numbers work. So anyway, I can see that only a few of y'all have hung with me on this ice day when I'm just sitting at home and thought I would get on the YouTube to talk. I don't see any comments here in the chat besides my wonderful team. Let me see if there's anything. Nothing on my phone. So as always, if you have questions about real estate, about North Carolina, about auction, about anything at all, you can always reach out to me. Maybe I'll just show back up for another AMA at some point in the future. In the meantime, wherever you are, stay warm, stay safe. And if you're not good at driving on icy roads, then don't. And we'll see you around in the future.